Étienne Gilson explains his 50-year career in the philosopher and theology, his intellectual autobiography, open quote. As the long adventure of a young Frenchman brought up in the Catholic faith who was indebted to the Church for his entire education and to the University of Paris for his philosophical training, who found himself confronted by Cleo with the task of discovering the precise nature of theology, and who, after devoting many years of his life to the discussion of this problem, found the answer too late to put it to use. This academic resume initially surprised individuals who were not familiar with Gilson. A cursory look through Gilson's published works reveals an interest in the philosophies, not the theologies, of medieval thinkers. In fact, as Gilson freely admits, he had believed for the majority of his life that the only theological concepts worth studying were those found in the catechisms. End quote. Gilson does not identify as a theologian in his intellectual autobiography. Rather, he calls himself a philosopher. Gilson's description of his intellectual life as a lengthy journey towards theology seems odd in light of this. In other words, Gilson discovers theology through Christian philosophy and, in turn, re-examines Christian theory from a fresh perspective. Gilson did not devote much time to theology for the majority of his life, as we shall see. But the only place he can find solutions to the problems he has been pondering for years is theology. By the end of his voyage, Gilson had transformed what had started out as theology lost into theology regained. Gilson learns the true nature of theology by passing through the gate of Christian philosophy, to be more precise. Gilson takes a very long time to realize this, to be sure. As we shall see, Gilson spends the most of his life unable to understand the actual character of religion because, as he freely confesses, he wandered in the past and sought the course of events from the wrong end. Gilson had examined the philosophical ideas found in St. Thomas's and the scholastics' texts specifically as philosophies, not theologies. Gilson has therefore maintained, for the most of his life, that only philosophical conclusions cannot be applied to theology, specifically because they are based on rational premises and do not entirely rely on faith. Gilson comes to the conclusion that this idea of theology is flawed after years of studying St. Thomas's ideas. The scholastics did not engage in philosophical discussion like other thinkers. This implied that theology may incorporate solely scientific evidence without distorting its core. In scholastic thought, reason advances into faith and achieves its pinnacle of development, with St. Thomas Aquinas' views. Philosophizing is being done. When we really reason about theological issues, we can even bring some comprehensibility to the most profound mysteries of the faith. Since philosophy and theology are more closely related than Gilson had previously realized, both of his previous conceptions of Christian philosophy and theology needed to be updated. One idea has to be fully understood in order to fully understand the other. Christian philosophies evolve primarily to support and advance theological objectives and goals of theologians. The development of Christian philosophy goes beyond that of theology alone. A theologian's writings might then adopt a completely philosophical mode. On the other hand, the best Christian philosophies, according to Gilson, are particularly those of the scholastics, within the framework of their very theologies. To comprehend how this is possible, specifically how Christian philosophy might be applied in a theology, it is important to remember Gilson's first perception of the Christian philosophical idea. He claims to have intuition early in his career and still does throughout his life. He has maintained that the term Christian philosophy does not imply any particular. Instead, it belongs in the exercise's order as a historical fact necessitated description. Christian philosophy is a philosophical endeavor. Gilson will then go on to say that St. Thomas' Christian philosophy, which is regarded as the best method of philosophy, is both philosophical and theological, and that it organizes its philosophizing to be primarily theological ends. According to Gilson, when Christian philosophy is practiced in a theological mode, philosophy enters into theology without dissolving into it. In this instance, reason is elevated to faith and the natural water of philosophy blends with the supernatural wine of theology. Gilson does not come to these conclusions in a single sitting. He learns what he calls Christian philosophy and the true meaning of theology over the course of a lifetime. Continuing with this practice will teach us how to stay out of the confusion Gilson slowly emerged from over the course of his more than 50-year career. Gilson intends for his autobiography to act as a kind of manual for the next generation of Christian intellectuals who will go on his endless search for the truth. The Philosopher and Theology is written by the author, according to Gilson, so that these pages may bear witness to the author's numerous uncertainties, and now that he has found a solution, it is his honest desire that he will make it simpler for others to avoid them. Gilson claims at the conclusion of his journey that Christian philosophy transcends fundamental divisions and may be practiced in both theological and philosophical ways. Modalities, depending on the goals the Christian thinker aspires to. However, a theologian who philosophizes in the manner of St. Thomas will always be the best philosopher. In the end, the Christian philosopher performs his finest Christian philosophy when he adopts a Thomistic mindset. The fullest expression of Gilson's conception of Christian philosophy can be found here. A scholastic theologian and, to emphasize the argument even more, a Thomist will always be the best Christian philosophers. Had reached the theological shores. The process of planning his journey there, including all of the calm waters and rough rides encountered along the way, the focus of this essay. We must exercise caution since, although we can see the harbor in the distance, if we make one mistake along the way, we will, at best, arrive somewhere else or, at worst, capsize. Gilson's journey must be followed as closely as possible so that we can continue where he left off once we have safely reached the shore of his final findings. Gilson hands us the theological baton, and it is up to us Christian thinkers of the 21st century to philosophize as did St. Thomas, within faith, as theologians. Historical phase. Christian philosophy as concrete historical reality. Since Gilson first recognizes the circumstances that make Christian philosophy a concrete historical actuality, I refer to this period as the historical phase of Christian philosophy. As we shall see, Gilson must first establish that the statement is logically possible before he may then point out the historical circumstances that best explain this Christian thought. It would be pointless to look for Christian philosophy in the past if, as some have claimed, it is impossible from a logical standpoint. Gilson can then assess if there have been Christian ideas in history after proving their logical validity. Gilson establishes the foundation for interpreting Christian philosophy as an act of philosophizing here by identifying the physical reality of Christian ideologies. A crucial idea that he will uphold and expand upon for the rest of his analysis of the issue. On March 21, 1931, Gilson delivers the notion of Christian philosophy during the Christian philosophy debates. As Gilson recounts, by adopting the term Christian philosophy in his books, he had drawn himself into a vigorous discussion. Three things sparked the dispute. Gilson encountered opposition from rationalist philosophers like M. Breyer, who in a series of lectures titled Is There a Christian Philosophy? In 1928 rejected the idea of Christian philosophy. The rationalists maintain that there cannot be a Christian philosophy because philosophy dispenses with revelation just as reason dispenses with prejudice, and they contend that where philosophy is at odds with revelation, reason is at odds with prejudice. That Christianity should be risky is unfortunate. This viewpoint contends that there is no connection between the ideologies of reason and faith. Philosophy results from the reasonable application of human reason in one order, whereas Christian revelation leads to faith in another. The name Christian philosophy, according to rationalists, is a contradiction in terms because reason and revelation are incommensurable in terms of truth. Neither can be equated. Rationalists believed that while Christian thinkers could be philosophers, Christian philosophers could not. Furthermore, the rationalists asserted that since religious dogma dominated so-called medieval philosophies, they were ineligible to be classified as philosophies. They are not philosophies, but at most they could be theologies. In case you missed it, rationalists believed that the things we know by reason, which are part of a rational order, are unconnected to things we know by faith, which are in an irrational order of knowing. In conclusion, any so-called Christian philosophy would not be a philosophy at all because the rationalists believed that faith and reason cannot be united, overlapped, or in accord with one another. The autonomous function of reason in a philosophy would be destroyed if faith were to influence it. In other words, the interaction of faith and reason would imperially combine to produce a third sort of knowledge, corrupting a person's reasoning faculties to the point where his Christian philosophy would no longer be a philosophy but rather the result of an irrational exercise. This is not feasible. Thus the rationalists contend that the idea of Christian philosophy is a contradiction in terms. Positions held at the time by theologians were on the opposing side of the debate. These theologians who adhered to a certain form of fideism believed that it was dangerous to link philosophical ideas to religious beliefs. The theologians believed that philosophy is worthless or destructive wherever Christianity is. Philosophy, according to theologians, is not a perfect science. But since God is the source of all truth, he cannot lie. Therefore, to suggest that a Christian philosophy is possible would be to imply that God would leave himself open to the possibility of making mistakes. Therefore, it would be denying the absolute to suggest that some revealed truths can act as logical starting points for inquiry. The necessity of faith in light of knowledge of God's truths. In other words, Christian revelation is the revelation of divine truth, which is infallible because it comes from God and is made known to man directly. Only truth can be communicated by God, who is truth. Therefore, these theological viewpoints lacked faith in human reason's ability to reach any accurate understanding of God. Theologians believed that the Christian thinker does not require a philosophy in this sense. Man already knows the truth because God has revealed it to him. A Christian thinker cannot err as long as he is rooted in his faith. In sum, because philosophies are human endeavors developed by the natural light of reason, they steer the boat of truth incorrectly. So, whatever appears to be philosophy in theology is in fact not an exercise of reason but rather a kind of supernatural reason. This supernatural reason is somehow superelevated by faith and no longer subsists in a natural mode. Ascending to the order of grace, any apparent reasoning in theological writings would be treated as existing by the light of faith and in a mode akin to Scripture. Theologists denied the role of reason in any matters that the faith could attest to. In this way, everything of humankind's understanding of God is a part of the order of faith. Therefore, Christian philosophy is meaningless since there is no connection between religious organizations and rational thought. Last but not least, Gilson discusses so-called neo-scholastic perspectives that denied the existence of a Christian philosophy in order to conform to the exclusively rationalist paradigm of the day. Although they concurred with the rationalists that Christian philosophy did not exist, these neo-scholastic theologians did not concur that medieval philosophies were not genuine philosophical systems. Neo-scholastics asserted that medieval philosophies, and especially St. Thomas thought, are philosophies insofar as they are rational. The neo-scholastics, according to Gilson, open quote, believed that if the Thomist philosophy was philosophy, it was insofar as rational and not insofar as Christian, end quote. Neo-scholastics believed that Christian philosophy is meaningless in this way. The neo-scholastics contended that faith had to have been absent from medieval philosophies for them to have existed. It was not possible to say that these philosophies were entirely logical. Therefore, since medieval ideas were not Christian philosophies, the idea should be abandoned because it is unhelpful and does not reflect reality as it really is. These neo-scholastics also argued that the contents of faith mostly concur with what reason can demonstrate through natural processes. In addition, they asserted that since divinely revealed facts bear the seal of perfect certainty and truth cannot contradict truth, any philosophical argument that any judgment that conflicts with one of the revealed truths of faith is incorrect. Here, the philosophical argument would need to be changed to either support or, at the very least, not be in opposition to any revealed truths of the religion. All factual contradiction between faith and reason, according to Gilson, is a sign that the philosophical order is flawed and a signal to reassess the issue. Finish quote, however, as Gilson notes, open quote. All of the neo-scholastic philosophers add that philosophy is the exclusive product of reason insofar as philosophy, end quote. In conclusion, the neo-scholastic viewpoint maintained that because both religion and reason are based on the truth, they are ultimately in agreement with one another. However, the neo-scholastics rejected the idea that faith may give philosophy fruitful launching pads for philosophical research. These neo-scholastics thought that there is no such thing as a Christian philosophy, only a just and genuine philosophy that is compatible with Christianity. The neo-scholastic viewpoint rejected the notion that a Christian spirit could inspire and direct a purportedly Christian philosophy. Though they are not at odds, faith and reason cannot, strictly speaking, coexist.